Since the end of the war, former German General Reinhard Gehlen has been developing his spy network in West Germany under the U.S. Army. Now, the newly created Central Intelligence Agency is poised to take over Gehlen's organization. Meanwhile, the U.S. government has kept the public from knowing the extent to which former Nazis are involved in American intelligence operations.
I call it the CIA's original sin, that they would actually incorporate this Nazi-infested spy apparatus into the bosom of U.S. intelligence. And this is all done behind the back of the U.S. public.
In fact, the CIA's own analysts are now well aware that Gehlen has been recruiting war criminals under the less than watchful eye of the U.S. Army.
The U.S. Army wanted tactical information about movements of the Soviet armed forces in occupied Germany. As long as the Gehlen organization continued to provide information on that, the U.S. Army looked the other way on big questions of recruitment.
CIA officials realized they must begin to assert greater control over Gehlen. In spring of 1948, they assigned a young, decorated Army colonel to investigate Gehlen's sprawling organization.
So the CIA sends James Critchfield to investigate Gehlen, to meet with him. Critchfield comes back and he says the CIA should acquire responsibility for the Gehlen organization.
During an interview with the BBC in 1992, the former colonel explained why he told the CIA that it was still going to need Gehlen and his vast spy network.
The reason that I recommended in my original report in December 1948 that we accept responsibility for this organization was that we really had no choice. We had no specialists who had dealt with Soviet forces.
But the CIA also recognizes the danger that Gehlen poses.
When the CIA looked at this organization, it realized that it had grown so big that it now represented a threat to democracy in West Germany. We don't have a choice. It exists. We can either work with it, control it, penetrate it, use it, or it'll work against us.
And once again, growing Soviet aggressions helped to improve Gehlen's position with U.S. officials. In June 1948, Stalin imposes a blockade on West Berlin, attempting to starve the city and force it to submit to communist control. U.S. warplanes deliver food and medical supplies to the city, and nearly a year later, Stalin finally backs down. The Berlin crisis sparks widespread fear in the West that war with the Soviets is imminent. It is in this atmosphere that the CIA elects to maintain Gehlen's organization. Colonel Critchfield demands greater control over Gehlen's recruiting practices, but he soon learns that the former Third Reich general has his own agenda.
Gehlen says, fine, I'll give you what you want. As soon as it's clear that the CIA is going to pick up the tab for Gehlen, the trap shuts. And he says to the Americans, I'm sorry, you misunderstood me. I can't give you the names of the people I'm hiring. That would be against German prestige.
Gehlen also chides his American supervisors, reminding them of how little they know about running a European intelligence operation.
You're so naive, you Americans. We Europeans have been spying for centuries. You have to have confidence that I understand how to run an intelligence organization.
Ultimately, the CIA's attempts to control Gehlen proved no more successful than the Army's. By 1949, in response to Stalin's aggressions in Eastern Europe, the US and 11 European countries, which will later include West Germany, formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Any attack on a member nation will be considered an attack on the entire alliance. And because Gehlen's network is a main conduit of intelligence flowing from east to west, it becomes a prime target for Soviet spies looking to infiltrate the NATO alliance.
It was harder for the Soviets after World War II to penetrate directly the United States government, but it could penetrate the Gehlen organization and acquire NATO secrets.
One method by which Soviets gain access to the Gehlen organization secrets is to blackmail the same Nazi war criminals hired by Gehlen, forcing them to work for the Soviets.
They used what they knew about the backgrounds of people in the Gehlen organization against those people. They basically said, listen, we know what you did in World War II, and if you don't work for us, we will expose you.
As a result, many of Gehlen's operatives become double agents, spying on the US and NATO for the Soviets. The worst among these is Heinz Felfa, whose treachery blew the covers of hundreds of spies.
Heinz Felfa had been in the SS during World War II. He worked his way up the Gehlen organization and ultimately became chief of Gehlen's operations against Soviet intelligence, and he was a Soviet mole. What this means is that every Gehlen operation in the Soviet zone was penetrated and compromised to the Soviet Union by Felfa.
As declassified documents now reveal, since 1949, the CIA had been spying on Gehlen's organization.
A number of intelligence professionals in the CIA never wanted to work with Gehlen, and they continued to make the argument that Gehlen is a mistake.
Even though the CIA is well aware of the dangers posed by Heinz Felfa, it does nothing to prevent counter-espionage within Gehlen's organization. The blame for this, according to author Timothy Naftali, lies squarely with two parties.
It should be laid on Gehlen and laid on the CIA for basically mishandling Gehlen and not putting screws to him.
In fact, it isn't until 1961 that CIA agents arrest Heinz Felfa as a KGB agent. Through the early 1950s, the CIA continues to investigate additional reports of Soviet penetration of Gehlen's organization. Nonetheless, even Gehlen's harshest critics acknowledge that he was hugely successful in one key respect. Through his efforts, the new government of West Germany was able to build its own intelligence apparatus. In 1956, Gehlen's organization officially becomes West Germany's intelligence operation, known as the BND. Some say that, as a loyal German, Gehlen had been working toward this goal from the very start.
He had achieved what he wanted to achieve overall. He had become a very significant figure in German history, so that I think in the end Gehlen was the winner.
But the true cost of employing Gehlen's organization and using former Nazi scientists will not be revealed for another 4 decades. By the 1970s, some Americans are beginning to ask questions about the presence of ex-Nazis in their midst.
As an American, what are these people doing on our shores? How many Americans went to fight in World War II? All of a sudden to have their sacrifice made a mockery of by having Hitler's henchmen come here and be given security and the benefits of liberty.